and we'll go back. Okay, so BMI is one of the ways that we measure obesity in the population, okay? BMI is not in any way, shape, or form a measure of how much fat or muscle or bone mineral or water or anything else that's in your body, okay? All BMI is what do you weigh based upon how tall you are, okay? It's a rough estimate of how much space you're occupying. It's a terrible measure, except that it's really, really easy for us to get, okay? I can call you on the phone and say, how tall are you? How much do you weigh? And I can calculate your BMI. Then I can ask you, have you had a heart attack, right? Do you have high blood pressure? Are you a type 2 diabetic? How many times a week do you exercise, et cetera? It's really, really easy for us to gather data on all of that. If I want to know what your body composition actually is, what is your percentage body fat? What is your percentage of muscle, okay? If I want to know those things, I need to have specialized equipment that tends to be more expensive. So as you will see as we go along in class, we have a huge amount of data that has been collected on thousands and thousands of people as we look at relationships between the body mass index and mortality rates from every disease you can think of, from how many times you exercise, all of these things, okay? And in a very general sense, there is a relationship that says if my BMI is in this normal range, which is about 18 to 25, then I have some kind of mortality rate from cardiovascular disease. If I am underweight by BMI, okay, then that's going to go up a little bit. As I progress into overweight and then into obese, which this is old data from 1999, it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the best scientific journal in the world. We've shifted these numbers around, but as you get into overweight and obese, then your risk of dying from cardiovascular disease goes up. Basically, the higher your BMI is, the risk of your dying from anything is going to go up, okay, if we control for everything. So in that particular way, weighing more, potentially being obese by BMI, is a very, very severe risk factor, okay? So that's the other piece of this that's going to play into everything. If you look at obesity rates, they tend to track with mortality rates. The cool thing that we're going to learn in class, though, is that if we can be fit, if we can do things with muscles, if we can do things from both a muscular and an aerobic metabolic fitness standpoint, we can, for the most part, make all of this increased risk of dying from cardiovascular disease, diabetes, pretty much everything, we can make all of that go away, okay? And we'll talk about how. We'll talk about why in that way, okay? And even if you are obese, if you're very physically active and you're relatively fit, then that is protective and it counteracts the bad things that happen from being obese, okay? Whoops, okay. Close that down for a moment. Everybody, if you got a laptop up, put your laptop down. Close your laptop for just a second. Okay? This is fun. I like to do this. All right. So I want you to turn to the person behind you, although that's not going to really go that well if you're in the very back because there's nobody behind you. So turn to someone next to you, and I want you to tell them what you think the definition of fitness is. How would we define fitness? Okay? Imagine that one of your parents asked you, like you're an exercise science major, what does it mean to be fit? So try to come up with something. I'll give you guys like 2 minutes. Okay? Go.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think too. And then fitness is kind of like something that you do. It's not just like health and like fitness is like healthy too. But Yeah.
Are you a group of one? You're talking with them? Okay. Y'all still have time? Are we done? We have a definition? All right, we want me to make things interesting, like whichever pair or small group of you gets the closest. Although some of you may have cheated, like if I give you guys, promise y'all a bonus point on your first test, we all like fight to the death over those things. All right, so let's start with this. I'm just gonna randomly pick my guy in the OU sweatshirt. What's your name?
Cade.
Cade.
Yep.
Okay, you and Camilla, right? We're together. What did y'all come up with?
We said that fitness can be like two things. It can be sport and it can be daily activity level.
Okay.
And then how many minutes a day you're being active. And then on top of that, like what type of activities you're doing. And then strenuous level on the
Okay. So how active I am, all right, and then sort of how strenuous are those things. That's very reasonable. I'll tell you guys that that's probably going to contribute to fitness, but I'm not sure that that's exactly what, if you had to look up fitness in the dictionary, that it was, that we're gonna, y'all, that's a good idea, that we're gonna come back to that. We'll jump over here. Green sweatshirt, your name is? Lindsay. You and Tessa, we all were together? Okay. What did y'all come up with? My ability to use my body or my muscles to benefit my, what would a benefit to myself look like? Tessa's like, no. Not sure? It's okay. 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 Interesting. There's some right things in that for sure. Okay, there's some right things. We'll go to the very, very back. So y'all tell me your names, and then this is my poor excuse for trying to, y'all are gonna move seats, and then in the next class, I'm gonna forget like who's where, but that's okay. So y'all are, I don't care, either side, doesn't matter. Katie? Okay. Okay. So that's it. So again, what you guys are, that's physical activity, right? Like that's moving, that's doing something. But if a person is more fit than someone else, let's think about it that way. What does that mean, right? What would a person that is more fit be able to do that a person that is less fit is maybe not able to do? So I agree that being active is going to contribute in many, many ways to fitness. That's absolutely right. And there may be a certain amount of activity that we want to do to achieve certain levels of fitness. But what does it mean to be fit? Yes, my body functions better. Okay. Would you guys like me to test someone in class's fitness right now? Everyone's like, oh shit, don't look at me. Not me, not me, okay? Can I get one brave volunteer? I'm not telling y'all. So, okay. Remind me your name again?
Kelly.
Kelly. Kelly, can you stand up, please? Kelly, do you have books in your backpack?
No, it's just this binder.
It's just that little binder.
There's literally nothing in there.
Okay, do this for me. Come stand, like, go over there where you give you a little bit of space, okay?
Okay.
I just want you to stand and put your arms out like this. Just hold them out. Okay. We're just going to leave her be for a minute, okay? And I'm going to keep asking questions, all right? Who else wants to share your definition of fitness? So my question is, can we, if I told you guys that how long she can hold her arms out like this would tell us something about how fit she is, how might that impact your definition of fitness? You doing okay?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay. Being able to perform a certain activity longer. Okay. So if I asked you guys, are you fit enough to run a marathon? How many of you would say yes? No? So all right. Well, you can do a marathon. We may have erred very badly in the midst of all of this. Okay. You're not fit enough to run a marathon. What if I said, how many of you are fit enough that you think you could run 5 kilometers? You could run like a little over 3 miles, 3.2 miles. Yeah? Okay. I would argue every one of you could, if forced to do so, probably run the 3 miles. Okay? So that's fitness. Okay? Kelly, what are we doing?
Fine.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay. She's not shaking yet. So the idea of what is fitness is, do you possess the necessary skill and ability to perform some task? Okay, thank you. I appreciate you. I don't want you to just sit there forever doing all that, but I appreciate you being a good sport, okay? She was fit enough to hold her arms out for the couple of minutes that I was asking her to do that, okay? Fitness relates to, can you perform a given task, all right? And as we change what that task is, then we can adjust how fit you are, okay? And we can group those tasks as things that require a certain amount of strength, or things that require a certain amount of endurance or metabolic function, or things that require a certain amount of flexibility, okay? Does that make sense? Do you guys kind of understand? So when I say that class is about health and fitness, we're talking about, right, where are you on that positive, negative kind of mental and physical and social well-being spectrum, but also, do you have certain abilities and characteristics to perform certain tasks? And as we increase the number of tasks and things that you can do, is there some interaction with how healthy you're going to be? And the answer, of course, is yes, in the midst of it. Okay? So my first group, when y'all mentioned that there might be, so it's over here, things related to sports, okay, like fitness for certain sports or fitness for other tasks or something, that's absolutely right. You can group fitness that way, right? Then you could also argue that, is there psychological fitness, right? Is there mental health from a fitness standpoint? Is there social fitness in a particular standpoint? Okay, so the kind of old definition from the World Health Organization is the ability to perform muscular work satisfactorily. I don't know what the hell that means. Okay, muscular work could be lifting weights, it could be doing push-ups, it could be running, it could be biking, it could be anything that you got to move. Okay, that requires muscular work. And then we're left with this kind of really squishy definition of what the hell is satisfactory. I don't know, okay? But it's basically, do you have some abilities that permit acceptable performance of a given task in a specified physical, social, and psychological environment, okay? How many of you have enough fitness to be able to get into and out of a bathtub? Okay? Think about your grandparents or great-grandparents if they are alive. You may have some of them that are not fit enough to, by themselves, get into and out of a bathtub or get up and down 2 flights of stairs while carrying groceries or something like that, okay? So we're going to kind of get into, people always think of fitness as it relates to performance, like, you know, how fast can you run? How many weights can you lift? How high can you jump? Like, are you good at basketball or golf or whatever? But the health aspect of things is going to come into, Are you fit enough to walk where you want to walk? Are you fit enough to, you know, drive a car or go shop for groceries by yourself or just do whatever it is that you need or want to do? Because aging is going to have some kind of big impacts on all of that. Okay? Is that making sense to you guys? I'll kind of see how that's going to work. Okay, because we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what are the things that are going to underlie sort of the anatomy and physiology and kind of the things that are going to contribute to why are you more fit to do a certain task versus another? Or are there certain kind of minimal levels that we need for strength, for endurance and things to do kind of regular tasks, and how are those going to change with age? That stuff's all going to come up as a part of class, okay? Okay, so if we think purely of physical fitness, right? So can you do kind of movement-ish things in a satisfactory fashion? There's something called cardiorespiratory fitness that we'll spend a lot of time talking about. Cardiorespiratory fitness is, in essence, how well do your heart and your lungs work at bringing oxygen in, taking it out to your muscles, and then the ability of your muscles to use that oxygen in its mitochondria to make energy, okay? People that are very highly endurance trained, they're better runners, they're better bikers, those kinds of things, have higher levels of cardiorespiratory fitness, okay? High cardiorespiratory fitness tends to be negatively correlated with cardiovascular. If you have good endurance and cardiorespiratory fitness, you have much lower risk from cardiovascular disease, much lower risk from metabolic disorders like diabetes, okay? Muscular strength, which is related very much so to how much actual muscle do you have, like how strong are you, is another component. This also tends to be related to mortality. I'll freak you guys out in the first lab when I tell you that I can predict when you're going to die based upon your grip strength, okay? So start training now. You got a couple of weeks before we do this, right? But I can predict when you're going to die from your grip strength or from how many squats you can do or something like that. But what I can really predict even better is how high are you going to jump? How fast can you run, right? Can you get up and down stairs and things like that that are going to require a certain amount of strength? You all don't think about that very often because you have plenty of strength, okay? Until you get to be my age and your child is a giant for her age, and you're like, why do I have to pick her ass up and carry her around all the time? Why is she not holding on and she's flailing about and doing things? And you're like, this makes no sense. This should not be a problem to carry 30 pounds around, but it's a wiggly 30 pounds, okay? It becomes really important. Things we call muscular endurance is going to sit kind of in between these two things. This is like how many push-ups can you do? How many sit-ups can you do? Okay, kind of consecutive. It's not really about running or biking or something like that, but it's more like kind of these sub-maximal contractions for some period of time. Weirdly enough, flexibility counts as a part of physical fitness. I, much like the protein powder, I am not very flexible, so I think it's pretty stupid. But we lose flexibility as we age. There's lots of things where flexibility becomes really, really important. Flexibility is a big issue if you have any kind of musculoskeletal injuries, right? If you go to OT or PT or something, a lot of what people are doing is trying to improve range of motion, trying to get normal movement and normal flexibility back, so it can be really, really important, okay? There we go. And then body composition. This one is less so, but there are certain kind of amounts of muscle and fat and overall weight and things that are going to play a role in your ability to do certain things, okay? Especially on the high end. The more you weigh, if you are what we would call morbidly obese, then it takes more force to move yourself around. If you're morbidly obese, you have lots of metabolically inactive tissue, and so your cardiorespiratory fitness is going to tend to be a little bit lower than not, and so that's kind of why it falls kind of in the range of all these things. Okay, so when we do our labs, we're going to assess muscular strength and muscular endurance. We're going to assess cardiorespiratory fitness. We're going to roughly estimate body composition, and we used to do flexibility. I'm actually bringing flexibility back this semester because you guys can do it by yourself. You can measure some things. Okay. Questions so far? Yes, Zach.
Why do you think flexibility is included?
Why do I think it's included? That gets me in trouble. I don't want to say mean things about the people that come up with all of these kinds of things. But I mean, if you lack flexibility, right? Like, I don't know that I can, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing it. Nope, okay, like, yep, not getting anywhere near my toes today. Oh, that feels kind of nice. Okay, you can lose so much flexibility, right, and so much range of motion in certain joints that it becomes very difficult to perform certain activities. And so that's why it's not just like, okay, if I did the sit and reach, I could probably get barely past my toes if you let me do a tad bit of warm up. We don't really mean that. We mean like I can't pick my arm up, right? Or I have so little mobility in my knee or at my ankle that I have a hard time walking. That's probably why it's there, okay? So I sometimes am flippant because I'm like, I'm not very flexible. And so I think it's dumb. But again, yeah, fire away.
Yeah, I remember when I was in middle school, they had like the technical guy, he would just like set up push-ups and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But then something you do things like
Okay.
so it's like I took the question like
Why is the same?
someone can like touch their toes because they would get they'd be able to complain a lot of times and something like that. But I wouldn't if I'm going to go on fit then
Right. They're more flexible. We can argue whether flexibility is its own kind of set of fitness and how that matters. And what you guys will see is that decreases in flexibility do correlate with mortality rates and things, but from a kind of underlying physiology standpoint, these other things are going to be much more kind of primary drivers of what it is. If you're not very flexible, you're also probably not very strong and not very cardiovascularly fit in those kinds of things. So, you can stretch all you want. You can do all the yoga you want. It's not going to help you like run a 5K faster or those kinds of things, right? Okay, good question. Was there another? I see somebody else with a hand up in the back. No? Okay. All right, so there's some more things about all of this. People will sometimes then break kind of fitness things into performance related. These are more like specific task oriented things like agility, coordination, muscular power, reaction time, balance, okay? We need some of these in our everyday life, but a lot of this is very kind of sport and skill specific in that way, right? Like, can you hit a softball? Could you throw a football or shoot a basketball or something like that, okay? Whereas health-related things are much more kind of basic physiology type stuff like body comp, bone mineral density, right? Metabolic function, strength, that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. Let's see where we are. Anybody notice that I posted the syllabus? Yes. Okay. We're close enough. Let's go ahead and we'll take our break now. All right. So let's come back at 11:55. We'll come back and we'll start talking a little bit more. So you guys that were talking about physical activity, we'll talk more about that kind of as we go forward. Okay. So our next set of stuff to talk about, we kind of have a bit of an understanding about health, a bit of an understanding about fitness, okay? Now we're going to bring in the idea of physical activity and a special case of physical activity that is exercise into the picture. And we'll learn a little bit about what those things are. Then we can get into the interaction between exercise and activity and how it may contribute to fitness. Okay, so I think this picture is pretty funny. Folks are going into the gym and they're going up the escalator rather than in the midst of all of that. But they're going to the gym, so we're going to give them credit for doing all of that. Okay, so here's an old quote from John Kennedy, and it's from December of 1960. And I use this to highlight that you guys will learn, if not today, then next Monday, that we have a serious problem because we are not very active. We are not very fit. We don't get a lot of physical activity. You guys get plenty as college students, right? You get plenty because we're way down here on one side of campus. You may have class on the other side of campus, and kind of those things. But once you get out of college and you get moving on, we're not very active. He called this the soft American, which I feel very attacked by all of that. But we are an under-exercised nation, he says. We look instead of play. That's kind of very prescient in thinking of social media and those kinds of things. We ride instead of walk. Our existence deprives us of the minimum of physical activity essential for healthy living. Okay? It's a very, very accurate depiction and a way of describing things when we had no real data at the time to even describe all of that. If he only knew what I'm going to show you guys a little bit later on how bad things might get, if he thought people were under-exercised in 1960, then whoa boy. Okay, whoa boy. All right, so think about the best way to present some of this. So before we really jump into the idea of what physical activity is and what exercise is, I want to take a minute to try to explain to you all a little bit about how do we know the things that we know about how active people are, how much exercise people get, and the relationship of those things to pretty much anything else. Okay? So if I want to know how active you are, I got to ask you. Or I got to let you got to like send me whatever your Apple Watch or your Fitbit or something tells me on a particular day, and we have to hope that that's going to be accurate. Okay? So there's some very classical older studies where we first began to understand, one, were there differences in how active people were, and was that going to play some role in this? And so there's a couple of very, very famous studies that I will talk about more than once. So I want to introduce them now. Okay? So there is a thing called the Harvard Alumni Study. Okay? And so in the Harvard Alumni Study, at least initially, okay, we'll talk about their biased against women. Ladies, y'all have been biased against for forever in scientific research. They wouldn't let you all like run a marathon in the Olympics until like the 1980s. I think they were afraid that your uterus would fall out, and a bunch of things. Science has not been kind to women amongst a whole bunch of things. But here we have data from about 17,000 men who, with an average age of 46, who had been followed for roughly 25 years. All of these men, as the title of the study suggests, were alumni of Harvard. Okay, so this was published in 1986, and you can imagine they began collecting data on people in the late 50s and the early 60s, and they would just follow people. So it would be like, you guys graduate next year, and we will do this to a little less of an extent. Most of you want to send you things and ask you for money. But you would call them every year and say, how much exercise do you get? Do you have high blood pressure? Did you die? Right? And you have to ask somebody else, like, did that person die? Or something, right? Do you have diabetes? Do you have cancer? Okay? And so what they found, this was the first paper, the first group thing where they found that what they call all-cause mortality, so your risk of dying from anything, okay, was in some way related to energy that was expended during non-vigorous and vigorous physical activity. So you can think of non-vigorous physical activity as walking, okay? Just, I'm kind of active every day. Maybe I'm active as part of my job, right? Vigorous intensity activity is more like jogging or something like that. So think of vigorous more as exercise levels and non-vigorous as just generally how active are you, okay? And what they found was that people that had higher amounts of both of those things lived longer or had less chance of dying from anything than people that had lower. Okay? And so what you can see basically is here is physical activity in what they're calling kcal, which is just a regular calorie that you think of. So how many calories are we expending in physical activity per week? Less than 500 calories, which is the equivalent of recovering less than 5 miles of total distance. Okay, you walk a mile, it's about 100 calories. You jog a mile, it's about 100 calories, right? Depending upon what you weigh and how much you flail your arms and things when you walk and run. That's a rough equivalent. Okay, people that were somewhere between 500 and 2,000, and then folks that were at 2,000 plus. And what you will note, okay, is that we have age ranges here. We have older individuals in these top two, and then somewhat younger folks down here. But there's a pretty similar kind of relationship in everybody. That the more active you are, the less chance there is of you dying from anything in the midst of all this. If you pull out stuff, it's really, really related to cardiovascular disease, certain kinds of cancers. So this may seem crazy to you guys, but you know, this was about 35 years ago. We had no idea. There was no data on all of these things that we think about now, about physical activity and health, and these things all being related in that way until, okay? There's other studies that are like this that are very large studies. There's a very famous one. It was called the London Bus Driver Study. You guys are aware, like in London, they have these double-decker buses. That's what I'm talking about. And they did a study where they looked at the kind of mortality rates between the bus drivers and the ticket takers. And the drivers sat all day and drove, and the ticket takers had to go up and down the stairs on the bus and walk around and take everybody's tickets. They were much, much more active. And unsurprisingly, the ticket takers tended to live much longer and have better health outcomes than the drivers. There's a thing called the San Francisco Longshoreman Study, but they looked at guys that worked on the docks in San Francisco that actually loaded and unloaded things on and off the ships versus the folks working in the offices in those places. The more active ones live longer. So we have lots and lots of data about all of this now, but this was some of the first. Okay, so we will come back. We'll spend a day later on in class talking about research methods and why this is a reasonable thing to do, but not the absolute best thing to do, but it gets us lots and lots and lots of data. We'll talk more about kind of how we know these things. This is why. It's because of studies like this, where I tell you that this is good for you. It's because there's data that supports it. Okay? We have things that science that actually supports the suppositions and the conclusions that we use to draw. Okay? All right. So let's look at the leading causes of death in the U.S. If we take cardiovascular disease and cancer, which account for more than half, and then we have stroke and diabetes. This is almost, out of all of this, like 3/4 of all deaths of adults in the U.S. And we look at the reduction in risk in dying from these things, from being more physically active, you will note that like a 50% reduction in risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. This is if you are active compared to being unactive. Reduction in cardiovascular disease, big reduction in diabetes, stroke, and for certain particular kinds of cancer. This is the take home from class. If you learn nothing else from class, get off your ass and do something. It's better for you, okay? Exercise or physical activity, simply going for a walk is as good a medicine as anything a drug company has ever invented for your overall health. It's way cheaper, okay? And it has benefits not only physically, but also mentally, okay? I am the OU sort of chairperson. We have a thing that's called Exercise is Medicine. It's run by one of our big national organizations. But the idea is we put on programs and educational things on campus to try to say, hey, people, like it's your lunch break, go walk for 20 minutes or something. Meet these minimal guidelines, and you're going to have these better health. Okay. This right here is the point of our entire class. If you remember nothing else, it should be this. Okay. We are overweight and obese and not very active as a society, and it is literally killing us. Okay. And when it's not killing us, it's costing us a huge amount of money to go to the doctor or to have to buy pharmaceuticals because we're type 2 diabetics. Okay, so we will get into lots of depth about how and why is it able to reduce the risk? What's specifically changing? Why are some activities better than others? And all of that. But this is the big take home. Okay? That's the big take. All right. Moderate to high levels of physical activity. Okay? If you can walk 20 minutes a day or more, you can live on average anywhere between 2 to 3 years longer than a person that does not. That may not seem like much to you all right now in your life, but imagine, okay, you get 2 to 3 more years with a partner, with a parent, or a grandparent, or a child, or somebody that you care about. It's a big deal, okay? What it also hides is that not only do you live longer, but if you're more active, you have a higher quality of life while you are actually alive. So this is the thing. If you can be more active, and in some ways, it doesn't matter when you start. Never been active your entire life. That's okay. Start now. You will get almost the same benefits as people that have been active. Okay. So we've got some of those things. Here's some more recent data, okay? And this is going to split out activity as it relates to mortality and how we're going to define physical fitness as being somewhat different than physical fitness. So what you can see is here's our relative risk of dying from anything. So we're taking basically the people that are in the 0 percentile. So these are the least active and least fit people here. And we're going to move ourselves up in the percentile ranks. So as we go right here, these are the most active and most fit people that we're testing. You can see that the most physically active people have about, right, maybe a 30, 25, 30% reduction. The most fit people are down at like 50 or 60% reduction, okay? So for this reason, we're going to talk about differences between physical activity and then exercise. Exercise is defined as physical activity that is undertaken with the express purpose of raising your physical fitness, okay? So I'm just going for a walk today. I'm strolling around campus to get some fresh air. That's physical activity. I'm walking fast. I'm walking up and down stairs. I'm jogging. I don't know, whatever else it is that you do. I went to spin class, you name it, okay? That is going to be stuff that's going to hopefully improve physical fitness, make strength go up, make cardiorespiratory fitness go up. Those are the things that are going to have an even more power. Activity is good. Just getting out and walking your dog, good. A little higher intensity, bigger improvements in fitness gets us even. Okay? So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what does this do, but really what do we need to do to make this side of things go. Okay? You guys with me so far? We probably crossed like the hour mark in class. Literature suggests that you guys start losing focus at about 50 minutes or thereabout. There's one way to take a text break. If you look a little sleepy, we'll just do some squats. We'll work on our fitness while we learn about how we work on our fitness. Okay? So I wanted to kind of put this in here. We talked a little bit about obesity. So we know that this is good. Being more active, being more fit is good. You think about obesity, about 70% of adults in America are either overweight or obese by BMI. Okay? That's a little bit of a misnomer, but at approximately 40%, and some of the most recent data are going to be considered obese. We project that by 2030, about half of Americans will be obese by BMI. Okay? About half. So it's a pretty crazy thing. And you can look at it. John F. Kennedy thought we were soft Americans here, right? When about 10% of the population was obese. We're going to get to 50%, right? There's been this very precipitous increase in rise in all of this. And there's been a whole lot of things in contribute. We'll talk more about that later. Okay? Now, as we talk about activity and we talk about fitness and its interaction with obesity, I need you guys to understand and appreciate what I told you before is that not all obese people are the same, okay? In general, obesity is a risk factor for a host of morbidities and all-cause mortality. But there are what we call metabolically healthy obese people. These are basically, I am overweight or obese, but I have high levels, relative levels of physical fitness versus metabolically unhealthy people, okay? Who I am obese, but I'm not very physically fit, okay? And so this is just showing kind of, we did not make this distinction. This is a relatively recent development. This is just showing the number of scientific articles that have been published where they talk about, or they split groups out into healthy metabolically obese people versus unhealthy metabolically obese people. It's become more prevalent, but initially we have a lot of it that's just, oh, well, you're obese, and so that can be bad. But there's actually a distinction to do. Okay? So we'll talk about how we separate some of that stuff. Okay. Of all of the things, okay, that we can look at, this is maybe one of the most important kind of graphs that I'm going to show you guys in the entirety of the class. Okay. These are some data it's actually data from the Cooper Institute in Dallas, the Cooper Aerobic Center. Anybody is from the Dallas-Fort Worth area that knows about that? The director's name is Ken Cooper. He's actually an OU alum. He wouldn't let his son into medical school here, and so he has cut us off from all funding in a very kind of punitive way in this. But they've tested thousands and thousands and thousands of people. We have people that go and do internships there from that particular area. They do a lot of interesting research and training people. What they did was, here they have, this is a body fat category, percentage of your weight that is fat. So they have actual measures of percent body fat from skin fold measures, which you'll learn how to do, or at least you'll get to watch people do it, if not do it yourself. And then we have people where they measured something from a cardiorespiratory fitness standpoint called VO2 max, which you will learn about in a couple of weeks. Okay? But these are what you're going to look at is, this is relative risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. We have aerobically fit people and aerobically unfit in the gold. And what I want you guys to look at is that as I become more and more obese, right, if I am aerobically fit, I have a lower risk of cardiovascular disease if I'm obese and fit than if I am a relatively lean or normal weight person that is not very physically fit. Okay? You need to be active to be fit. You need to run or bike or do those kinds of things. So these are the data. This is the idea that in some ways weight and obesity matters, but in a lot of ways, if you're very, very active and you're very fit because you're active, it doesn't matter nearly so much. Okay? This is a really, really, really big deal because it's a lot easier for people in instances to be more active than it is sometimes to control their weight. Okay, so I don't really know what this is. So I shared these slides with one of our other professors. He likes to talk about this one. I'm going to sort of ignore what this one is. I mentioned this already. We're going to make a distinction between physical activity and exercise. Okay? Activity, a physical activity, to be physically active, it is to produce a bodily movement from your muscles, which if you're going to move, you have to use muscles, that expends energy, uses ATP above sort of what your resting energy use level is. So you guys are sitting there. Some of you are resting more than others, but you're there. And if I ask all of you to stand up and do jumping jacks, okay, or stand up and do a couple of squats or jog in place, you're going to use energy to do that particular movement. That would be considered physical activity, okay? Any bodily movement that has energy expenditure over rest. Think of resting energy expenditure as you're laying in bed right when your alarm goes off in the morning, okay? That's resting levels of energy expenditure. I haven't done anything for a while. I'm just chilling. I'm right here. Exercise is a particular type of activity, but it is often planned and structured, and it is repetitive. But the key thing is that it is done with the specific goal of becoming more fit. Okay? Of becoming more fit. So that's kind of where we are with all of this. Questions about it? Okay. Your assignment for Monday is going to be to keep a journal of all of your physical activity and exercise between now and Monday. Okay? That's what you're going to turn into. You're going to write down what are you doing that's going to constitute physical activity, and then which of those particular instances, if any, are going to qualify as exercise. Okay? So I'll remind you guys of that when we get to the end of class. That's going to be your assignment for Monday. We're going to see how active are you, how much exercise are you getting. Okay, let's talk a little bit then about some of the underlying physiology of energy expenditure that's going to play some level or some role. I don't know why my wife is calling me. She knows that class. Let me text her really quickly and just make sure it's an emergency. All of you have had human fits, right? Like maybe a couple of you should have, all right? All of you have had, you guys talk about energy and ATP like in the intro to biology class or intro to SO or whatever the hell it's called these days. Yes, a little bit. So if I say ATP, you're not going to freak out on me, right? Okay. All of you have energy in your body. It is this stuff called adenosine triphosphate. We need energy. We need ATP for all of our bodily systems to function, but we especially need it to make our muscles contract and generate force to allow us to move. Okay? If you want to write or type, that costs energy. You want to blink your eyes, that costs us energy. Okay? So we measure energy expenditure in kcals. Okay? A certain amount of ATP used is going to be a certain amount of calories. When you see that food has a certain amount of calories in it, what that means is that that food can be broken down to release this number or this certain amount of ATP. Okay? Total energy that is expended during physical activity or exercise tends to increase as what we call intensity goes up, when duration goes up, or both. The longer you walk, the more energy you're going to expend. If I jog rather than walk, I'm going to expend more energy jogging a certain distance, okay, or for a certain time, than if I walk. Probably seems very intuitive, but I just want to mention all of that because we're going to get to a place where we're going to try to quantify the intensity and the energy expenditure of certain activities. All right. Here is the biochemical structure of ATP. You do not have to know it. I have anybody taking biochem? Okay, no. You would remember if you did. As the person that has a minor or almost a minor in chemistry, I've had organic chemistry, I've had biochemistry, and I have nothing but terrible remembrances of all of that. Dr. Mike, in exercise phys, they make you memorize this molecular structure, but I will not. Okay? Key things to remember about ATP. In your cells, in your muscles, you don't have very much ATP. You don't store a lot of ATP, okay? Because there's just physically not space to do it. And so to get around that idea, as you break down ATP to move or for your brain to function or whatever it's going to be, we need a way to put it back together. And we do that through metabolism, okay? We do that through several metabolic pathways, through glycolysis or the Krebs cycle and oxidative phosphorylation in the electron transport chain, through the breakdown of something called creatine phosphate, okay? We're going to make the ATP back. That is typically coupled with breaking down what we call substrates, so carbohydrates, glucose, or fat, okay? And so There are several pathways, there's several substrates. We don't talk about that very much in this particular class. You'll get a lot of that in exercise skills. But the general idea is, in order to move a bunch or to be active and to exercise, I need a way to make my ATP back so I can keep doing things, and so I will tend to then break down stuff that I've eaten or stuff that I have stored in my body. Okay? And the pathway and the substrate is going to vary based upon kind of the mode of exercise. Is it running? Is it walking? Is it biking? The intensity, whether there's oxygen or not, there's pretty much always oxygen. How well trained you are and kind of what you've eaten. We'll do a little bit on these things, but I just want to introduce this as a very basic thing. Okay? We need the energy we need to burn the energy. If we break down daily energy expenditure, what we're going to see is that if you think of all the calories you burn in a given day, right, that about 60 to 65% of that in an average person is from something called resting metabolic rate. Okay? To keep you alive, to keep your heart beating, to keep your lungs working, to keep your brain going, to run normal cellular processes based upon how much muscle you have, how much heart size is, and all of that, it takes a certain amount of energy to do all of that for a 24-hour period. Okay? If you were to just lay in bed for 24 straight hours, which sounds glorious, okay, that would be sort of what your basal or your resting metabolic rate is. Okay? It's a relatively easy thing to measure. We can do it in my lab. You come in, you lay down, we turn the lights off, we tell you try to fall asleep for about a half an hour. We put a hood over you and you just breathe normally. And we measure how much oxygen is going in, how much CO2 is coming out, and we can calculate the metabolic. Okay? So most people are at about somewhere between 60% and maybe 2/3 of your daily caloric expenditure comes from this. That amount is primarily determined by how much muscle you have in your body. More muscle, higher resting metabolic rate. Okay? You've got about 5 to 10% that comes from what we call the thermic effect of food. It costs us energy to eat and to digest that food. So that's the thermic effect of food. Okay? That's going to vary a little bit based upon what kind of food you eat, how much of it you eat, because that's going to affect the digestive process. And then in a regular person, somewhere between 1/4 to about 1/3 of their energy expenditure is going to come from some sort of physical activity. Okay? Now, if you're very active, either because you're a college student and you have to hoof it around campus all day, or you have a job where you're on your feet and you're very active, or you're a person that exercises a huge amount, then these numbers may get pushed around a little bit. But normally, physical activity is somewhere between about 25 and about 30% of your daily caloric expenditure. Leisure time activity, this is like I walk my dog, okay? Or I went and I played ultimate frisbee or something, and you can play ultimate frisbee. And we could actually do things with other people. That would be leisure time activity. Work, right? Maybe you wait tables, or maybe you have a job where you're loading an Amazon truck, or whatever it might be. You're up and you're active. That would be activity from work, what we would call planned exercise. So, I went to Dakota and I did a CrossFit vlog today. That would be planned exercise. And then what we call NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is this kind of catch-all for basically anything else where you might be moving around that doesn't exactly fall neatly into one of those. Okay? So we can look at all of this and figure out, so in a given day, I burned X number of calories. That would then explain then kind of, well, what do I need then to be able to eat to kind of make sure I have enough energy available to do that. Okay, so if we look at it, physical activity is an important way to increase energy expenditure. This is going to show kind of a rough approximation. If you weigh 150 pounds, that's in the red. If you weigh about 200 pounds, that's in blue. But it's going to tell you the approximate number of calories that you would burn in 30 minutes of doing whatever a particular activity is. So what you can see then is that jogging burns way, about 10 times as many calories as kissing does for 30 minutes. Okay? Golfing, even if you're walking, doesn't burn nearly as much because you're just not covering as much ground as you would be if jogging, but you're going to get like physical activity from vacuuming. You ever think about that, right? Vacuuming, dusting, okay, gardening, even walking your dog, which may vary depending upon how active your dog is, right? Those kinds of things that are not necessarily just kind of plain exercise. We have data on this for pretty much any activity you can ever think of. Okay, they have data on the caloric expenditure, and so when people do surveys, which you guys might want to do as part of capstone or something, you ask people what kinds of activities do you do in a given day. They can tell you, they can give you a time, and we can go and look up in this big table approximately how many calories are burned. So what we know is that the more calories you burn in physical activity, the greater the chances that your fitness will increase and the lower your chances of mortality from diabetes or cardiovascular disease. So more activity is better. And that is because it burns more calories. Okay? Questions about any of it? We doing okay? We'll do about 2 more slides, and then we'll call it up. So if the first thing that you remember from class is that basically being more active is better for you, the second thing I want you to remember from class, and I promise you, this will be a question on the first test. It will be a question on your final. It will be a question on your exit exam when you're a senior. We want to see if you remember these kinds of things. It is the information on this slide. This is the current recommendation by the American College of Sports Medicine and the American Heart Association in conjunction with the Centers for Disease Control. This is the recommendation for how active you need to be in a given week to gain some levels of health benefits due to physical activity. So they're going to recommend that you do 30 minutes, 5 days per week, or 150 minutes per week of what we call moderate intensity aerobic activities. This is going to be the equivalent of, say, brisk walking. 150 minutes per week of this, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity walking. We would call vigorous intensity would be like jogging. Okay? But the reason that these numbers have been arrived at is there is a certain amount of caloric expenditure that needs to happen per week, okay, to gain these health benefits. You can reach that by these moderate intensity activities need to be done for 150 minutes. To get us to that, it's about 500 calories of activity per week to get us there. Or because jogging is going to burn about twice the number of calories as walking, then you only need about half as much to get to that 500 kind of number like this. Okay? You must know these two things. And then additionally, which we will talk a little bit more about next week, in addition to being active from sort of a metabolic standpoint, they also encourage 2 days per week of total body strength training. Okay? Arms, legs, shoulders, back, kind of total body stuff. Okay? 2 days per week of about 8 to 10 strength exercises in the 8 to 12 repetitions performed until you can't do another repetition. So we can slide these numbers around based upon what activity you like to do. If you want to swim, then we can figure out how fast you're swimming, and we can say, okay, well, you don't need 75, you actually need 50. Because swimming is more intense than jogging. Or you're walking, but you're walking very slowly, so you don't need 150, you actually need 200. We can slide those things around. Okay? But that's where those numbers have come from. They have come from that a certain amount of caloric expenditure through physical activity is going to impart a certain amount of health. Okay. Cool. All right, we'll stop here for today. All right. I've loaded the first set of lectures, the first lectures. We had 2 different ones from Monday onto the YouTube channel. I need to post a link. I'm going to get this one up. Okay. For Monday, I want you to keep a log of all of the physical activity that you get between now and Monday. Okay? Between now and Monday. Bring that in. We're going to do something with it in class, and then you're going to turn it in. All right? Excellent. I know it's Wednesday, but have a good rest of the week. Have a good weekend. Be safe. Make good choices. All right? We'll see you on Monday.